We are digging in first on the downpipe today, and the first thing I do is remove the sensor. Obviously, I've removed the filter housing and such in order to access this. I use a wrench to loosen this up, and takes a little bit of time, and of course you're kind of twisting up the wiring harness as you go, so it pays to pull off the right angle clip as well as disconnect any clips that are holding it in place to help support it so that you can twist the cable without causing any problems. I tuck it up out of the way, I get out the penetrating oil, and I shoot some other things. I squirt the mounting bracket nut as well as the clamp for the turbo, and I try to reach the clamp down below. When I'm doing this down below, you'll note that this clamp, the bolt on this clamp, is actually bent. It did make contact with something on the ground, so I want to make certain in the future I don't have anything hanging down like that. But I try removing it with a couple tools, and it wound up not working very well. I wound up just going ahead and just cutting it, which I don't show here. Now I can remove the nut in the bracket below, and I can go back to the top and remove the nut in the bracket up there. With that removed, I can go ahead and go after the clamp that holds the exhaust onto the back side of the turbo, onto the turbine side of the turbocharger. And I loosen that up and pull that band off. And now I can wiggle the stock downpipe around a little bit. And there's not quite enough room for it to be removed. I have to loosen these mounting brackets for the exhaust to give us a little more wiggle room, and it does take a little bit more force than I was ready to use at first, but with a little bit of wiggling I was able to get it loose, and out comes the stock downpipe. It does turn out that that large cylinder in the downpipe was acting as quite a bit of a resonator, and you'll see that in a bit, that the car's sound did change radically. Here's the stainless steel downpipe that I purchased from Drew at Mid-Tennessee Diesel, and it actually does fit just perfectly. You can see it's connecting up with the bracket. I go ahead and put the clamp on. This bottom clamp, I don't want to get too tight right away. I want to make certain I've got maximum flexibility in order to make sure everything lines up before I over tighten it. And so I just tighten it enough to make certain that it's going to at least hold it on, taking advantage of like a spherical joint that it kind of creates at the bottom. I go ahead and put the nut on the bottom bracket. Then I put the clamp on around the turbo where it meets the exhaust. And one of the things I found here is it did not want to reach. When that happens, just reposition. Play around with that thing. Rotate it back and forth and look at it. You don't have it positioned right if it won't come together. After I did that a little bit, I could see where it was coming together, and now I could put the screw in. And with the screw in, I was able to tighten that up. I was able to go ahead and just torque that down. Then I went ahead and reinstalled the sensor. I used some anti-seize on that, making sure to get anti-seize on the threads, but not on the sensor itself. You'll note that I twist the harness counterclockwise first before installing it. That way, when it's installed, I don't have a bunch of stress on the wiring harness. And so I go ahead and tighten that with a wrench after I've installed it. And I also get out some pliers and I squeeze the clamps a little bit for these clips that I want to connect to the heat shield that's in place on the car. I think normally it hangs off the heat shield that goes between the turbo and the air filter, but I've decided with this routing's a little bit better and works fairly well. Next, I go ahead and tighten the nut at the bottom here. With that reasonably tight, everything's in place, I can go ahead and tighten the clamp. And I realized that, first of all, I want that rotated into a position where it's not going to interfere, run into the ground if the car winds up, going over any objects. And at the same time, I also paused and realized I should put a little bit of copper anti-seize on this screw in case I need to take it off later, and go ahead and tighten it down. The other thing I need to do is I need to tighten the nuts on this bracket over here that helps support the exhaust. And now I've got a nice, tight, straight through exhaust system. Beautiful stainless downpipe, fits perfectly, and you can see how it flows out the back through stock exhaust until we get to the end where I replace the mufflers with the MagnaFlows. These are turbo mufflers that are straight through, and this had a noticeable effect on the sound of the car, and I'll show that to you next. All right, so we're taking a look at intercooler hoses and this up pipe that goes to the intake manifold. This is how it normally routes. This goes over to the stock intercooler. Of course, I've adapted a blue silicone hose that went over this. However, we're going to be doing things differently. This hose is going to go away. Just a little concerned about old hoses and thin walls as we get to around 38 psi of boost. And this is the up pipe. You can see here where I brazed to get rid of the resonator that was in there. Upstream from here up, it's going to stay as it is. This needs to go away because we're going to be clamping up this silicone hose to it. This is set to be the same diameter as this, and then downstream we go to 70 millimeters, which will be the standard for most of my plumbing. So then from there, I've got all kinds of elbows and fittings and things like that that I can use to try and piece something together that will go from here to the hose elbow that's already on the intercooler in the car. So anyhow, this needs to come off because I need to be able to clamp to here. So let's go ahead and take that off. Put it in a vise, and I'm careful not to go too tight. I don't want to pinch down the aluminum, so you'll see it moving around quite a bit. I did start by trying to cut this with the Sawzall. That did not work well at all. I wound up using the cutting tool on a grinder, and what I would do differently in the future is I would look into buying a proper tubing cutter for this, perhaps even just an appropriate blade for my miter saw. Would be good, but anyhow, I'm able to do it this way, and I then go through and deburr because, well, it's really nasty what I wind up with. Yeah, it's not a perfect straight cut, but it does the job. I wind up going through and deburring the inside with a rotary tool. One of the things I did differently with the other tubes that I'm not going to show you on here is I switched to a little sanding drum attachment for that works a lot better for deburring the ends of these inside and out. I did use a wire brush here. Of course, this thing would work better if I bolted it to the workbench. Then I hit it with sandpaper. The reason for sandpaper is not only to finish deburring, but also make certain when I clamp up hoses that there's a really good high friction fit so that things don't slide off. All right, so then I cleaned it out with brake cleaner, just making sure there's no oil, no grit, no grunge left in here, and run a rag through it and just make sure that everything is nice and clean in there. And then I could go ahead and clamp this on. that first piece and then reinstall it, and I can start fitting the rest of it. It's gonna be tight in here for these couple of right angle elbows. You might be able to just barely see it back in here where I took that clamped on transition hose. It goes from, I think it's 65 millimeters to 70 millimeters, and slid it back a little bit so that I could position this. And now what I have to do is I'm going to have to eyeball it versus the next elbow here, and it's tight quarters. I think I'm just going to have to eyeball it, mark it, and always err on the long side. And I think where I need to be, I need to cut this elbow that's here is right about here. All right, I just cut this piece here. I've just cut it and trimmed it, cleaned it up on both ends. Yeah, I don't remember which side's the engine side, but let's just try it out and see how it fits. Okay. Let's see, it's about right in this direction. It needs to be shortened in this one. So let me try and line it up as I can. Tuck this in here. It's going to be, line it up with this. Actually, you know what? No, I think it's about right. I don't have to do anything with this. I guess the question is, did I go with the wrong hose size? God damn it. I might have the wrong hose size. I realized I had to expand the aluminum tubing, or I'd be waiting a long time for a new set of silicone hoses to come in. I decided this is a good workaround. I'd go ahead and expand the tubing. I was using an exhaust expander tool. And again, I didn't want to pinch things down the vise too much, so you'll see things moving around quite a bit while I work. But I was able to use this to expand it. You can see here how the end is pushed out a little bit. What I had to do is I had to expand this end to a full 3 inches, because that's what this is right here. And now it fits very nicely. So I go into the final fitment, and it's a lot of playing around, pushing and pulling and adjusting and starting to tighten clamps and loosening clamps and moving things around until I get things into exactly the position I want. I did all this. It took a while and a lot of back and forth, but I really like the way that it came out. I think that it fits very nicely. It winds up being a good solution. Starting from the intercooler, we go here through this bend, 90, a couple of clamps and a coupler, and we go to a reducing coupler, and then we go for the stock routing from there up into the engine. So now we have this system in place. I've tightened it all up, and it doesn't look like it's interfering with anything. I might put something around. Yeah, I'll put something around that hose to protect it, so we don't think we've got really a sharp edge here. Yeah. But beyond that, I think we're in pretty good shape. As we look at the remaining intercooler tubing, we start with the outlet from the turbo. On the right, you can see the plastic piece that came on the car from the factory. This piece is 20 years old. I'm afraid as we run up the boost, we could burst this thing, and plus it has a resonator that's not really needed. Here it is installed. I purchased this from Drew at Mid-Tennessee Diesel. It fits beautifully. Look at the outlet. That's different. You can't snap on the way you used to with this thing. However, you can clamp the way that I'm showing here. I chose to use a 45-degree silicone elbow followed by a 45-degree aluminum elbow, and then you can see the 90-degree that goes into the intercooler. Note that the right side of the aluminum 45 has already been expanded to fit the 3-inch inlet to the elbow on the right. Here it is installed. You can see that it actually fits very nicely. I did have to shove the tube further into the intercooler tube than I thought. And however, what I did is I clamped up where it was at where it was expanded to 3 inches, and so it's clamping in the right spot. I did have to trim this support for the radiator here. I did notch that. I did wind up putting a piece of hose over that in order to protect the aluminum tube and the steel from interfacing with each other. There's a little bit of a gap here, and with that, we actually have a system that is functional. Now we are at a part of this project where we can say that all of the hardware has been installed for the performance upgrade. We already had the hybrid turbo. We'd already eliminated a lot of things from the flow path in order to make the engine run smoother. We already had the intercooler. However, now we've got a larger high pressure pump. We've got 100% over injectors. We have the downpipe. We have the new intercooler tubing. And with all of that, we should be able to get to 400 horsepower in theory. We will see where we actually get to. That's the objective. This is a system. You can't just say, oh, I'm just going to increase the fueling or I'm just going to increase the boost. You need all of it if you're going to go to this sort of horsepower level. And we're now there. So the next step is when we get tunes from Drew, we'll start doing performance runs and see how things come out. So stay tuned, and you're going to see a whole lot more on this. Thank you.